The whiskey burned just right as I watched Maren practice her speech in the mirror. She'd been rehearsing the same 3 lines for 20 minutes, adjusting her smile like she was calibrating a weapon. The Christmas party was tomorrow night, and my wife had transformed into someone I barely recognized, all sharp edges and calculated charm. "Kellan, we need to talk," she said, turning from her reflection with that particular tone that meant the conversation was already over before it started. I set down my glass and waited. After 15 years of marriage, I'd learned that Maren's announcements came with the subtlety of a freight train. "All my colleagues think you shouldn't be at the Christmas party, so I'll go alone." The words hung in the air like smoke from a cheap cigarette. I studied her face, looking for some hint of the woman I'd married, but found only the polished executive who'd been slowly replacing her over the past 2 years. "Okay," I said. "Then go to them." Her face twisted, just for a second, before the mask slipped back into place. She'd expected a fight, maybe some begging. Instead, I reached for my whiskey and took another sip. "That's it?" she asked. "What else is there to say? You've made your decision. Your colleagues have made theirs. Go enjoy your party." Maren grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing only to deliver her parting shot. "Sometimes I wonder if you even care about our marriage anymore." The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. I counted to 10, finished my drink, and walked to my home office. The donation receipt was exactly where I'd left it, filed under charitable contributions in my meticulously organized filing system. Kellan Brooks, principal donor, Boston Children's Healthcare Foundation annual gala. Amount $15,000. I'd written that check 6 months ago when Maren first mentioned the party. She'd been so excited about the event, about the networking opportunities, about how it would look for her career. I'd wanted to surprise her, to be the supportive husband who made her shine even brighter. Now, I had a different plan. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the letterhead. "Dorsey Events, this is Margaret speaking." "Mrs. Dorsey, this is Kellan Brooks. I'm calling about tomorrow night's gala." "Oh, Mr. Brooks, how wonderful to hear from you. We're so grateful for your generous contribution. Is everything all right?" "Actually, I wanted to discuss the program. I noticed my name isn't listed as a presenter, despite being the principal donor." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Oh my, you're absolutely right. That's quite an oversight on our part. Would you like us to correct that?" "I would, thank you. And I'd like to make a small change to the seating arrangements if possible." "Of course, Mr. Brooks. Whatever you need." 20 minutes later, I had everything arranged. The program would list me as the keynote presenter. My name would be announced as guest of honor, and I had a proper escort for the evening. Avon Bardell, the committee chair, who'd been nothing but gracious about the last-minute changes. I'd met Avon 3 years ago at a similar charity function. She was sharp, funny, and had the kind of warmth that Maren seemed to have misplaced somewhere along her climb up the corporate ladder. When I explained the situation, carefully edited, of course, she'd agreed to help without hesitation. "Your wife excluded you from an event you funded?" Avon had asked, her voice incredulous. "That's not just rude, Kellan. That's cruel." My phone buzzed with a text from Maren. "Don't try anything petty. Security won't let you in anyway." I replied with the RSVP code Mrs. Dorsey had just sent me, then turned off my phone. The access list would refresh within the hour. The next evening, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my tie. The navy suit fit perfectly. I'd had it tailored 6 months ago for this very event. The irony wasn't lost on me. Avon arrived at 7 sharp, looking stunning in a deep green dress that complemented her auburn hair. She had the kind of natural elegance that couldn't be bought or practiced. It just was. "Ready to make an entrance?" she asked, offering her arm. "More than ready." The grand ballroom at the Fairmont was everything Maren had described. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and enough flowers to stock a small florist shop. The guest list read like a who's who of Boston's medical and pharmaceutical elite. These were Maren's people now, the colleagues who'd decided I wasn't worthy of their company. We paused at the entrance as the photographer snapped pictures. I spotted Maren across the room, her face frozen in shock as she registered my presence. She was standing next to Vincent Hale, her department's vice president, and, if my suspicions were correct, much more than a colleague. Mrs. Dorsey appeared at my elbow, beaming. "Mr. Brooks, so wonderful to see you. Are you ready for your presentation?" "Absolutely." Maren started moving toward us, Vincent trailing behind like a confused puppy. Her expression had shifted from shock to something approaching panic. "Kellan, what are you doing here?" she hissed when she reached us. "I'm the guest of honor," I said calmly. "Didn't you get the updated program?" Mrs. Dorsey handed Maren a fresh copy, pointing to my name in bold letters under Keynote Presenter. "Mr. Brooks has been so generous with his support. We're thrilled to have him speak tonight." The color drained from Maren's face as she scanned the program. Vincent stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation with his politician's smile. "There must be some mistake," he said smoothly. "Mrs. Brooks is our department representative for this event." "Oh, there's no mistake," Avon interjected, her voice honey-sweet. "Mr. Brooks contacted us yesterday to claim his speaking slot. As the principal donor, he certainly has that right." I watched Maren's world tilt sideways. She'd built her entire evening around being the star, the connected executive who could command respect and attention. Instead, she was suddenly a supporting character in someone else's story. The dinner bell chimed, and Mrs. Dorsey guided Avon and me toward the head table. I could feel Maren's eyes boring into my back as we walked away, but I didn't turn around. This was just the opening act. The ballroom hummed with conversation as guests found their seats. I'd been placed at the head table between Avon and Dr. Patricia Rowan, the Foundation's board chair. Maren sat 3 tables away, close enough to watch every moment but far enough to feel the distance. Dr. Rowan was a formidable woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. She'd built her reputation on precision and had little patience for games. "Mr. Brooks," she said, as the salad course arrived, "I have to admit, I was surprised by yesterday's program changes. Your wife had been coordinating with our office for months." "Maren is excellent at coordination," I replied carefully, "but she felt it would be more appropriate for the actual donor to represent our family tonight." It wasn't technically a lie. Maren had definitely felt something was appropriate. "How thoughtful of her," Dr. Rowan said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Avon leaned closer. "Kellan's been incredibly modest about his contributions. He's funded 3 separate research initiatives this year alone." Another careful truth. I had made those donations, though they'd all been processed through joint accounts that Maren managed. She'd taken credit for the generosity while I'd remained invisible in the background. As the main course was served, I noticed Vincent making his way toward our table. He moved with the calculated confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way through charm and intimidation. Unfortunately for him, I'd spent 20 years in public relations. I knew every trick in his playbook. "Kellan," he said, extending his hand. "Vincent Hale, Maren's colleague. I don't think we've been properly introduced." I stood and shook his hand, noting the expensive watch and the way his eyes kept darting toward Avon. "Vincent, Maren's mentioned you." "All good things, I hope," he said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "She speaks of you often." The ambiguity was intentional, and Vincent's smile faltered slightly. He was trying to gauge how much I knew, how much Maren had revealed about their relationship. "I hope there's no awkwardness about tonight," he continued. "The seating arrangements, I mean. We had everything organized, and then the principal donor decided to attend." Dr. Rowan interrupted smoothly. How unusual. Vincent's face flushed. He'd walked into that one beautifully. Of course, he stammered. I just meant that you're surprised someone would want to see how their charitable contributions are being used? Avon asked innocently. How strange. I almost felt sorry for Vincent. Almost. He was outgunned and didn't even realize it yet. Perhaps you should return to your table, I suggested. I believe they're about to begin the presentations. Vincent retreated, and I caught Maren watching the entire exchange. Her expression had shifted from panic to something approaching fear. She was starting to understand that this wasn't just about the party anymore. Mrs. Dorsey approached the podium as the dessert plates were cleared. Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored tonight to have our principal donor, Mr. Kellan Brooks, share some words about the importance of medical research funding. The applause was polite but genuine. I stood, straightened my jacket, and walked to the podium. 200 faces looked up at me, including Maren's pale, strained features. Thank you, I began, my voice carrying easily through the room's sound system. When I first learned about the Boston Children's Healthcare Foundation, I was struck by their mission statement. Healing through honesty, progress through partnership, hope through transparency. I paused, letting the words settle. Those aren't just pretty phrases on a website. They represent fundamental values that should guide all our relationships, professional and personal. Maren's face had gone completely white. She knew exactly what I was doing. In my work as a communications consultant, I've learned that trust is the foundation of every successful partnership. When that trust is broken, when transparency disappears, the entire structure begins to crumble. The audience was listening intently now. This wasn't the typical donor speech about tax benefits and feel-good philanthropy. Tonight, I'm proud to support an organization that values honesty above convenience, that chooses transparency over comfortable lies. Because in the end, the truth always emerges. Always. I looked directly at Maren for the final line. The only question is whether we choose to face it with dignity or wait for it to find us. The applause was stronger this time, more engaged. Dr. Rowan was nodding approvingly, and I could see several board members exchanging meaningful glances. They were smart people who understood subtext. As I returned to my seat, Avon squeezed my hand. Beautifully done, she whispered. Maren was staring at her phone, probably texting Vincent in a panic. Whatever she was saying, it wasn't helping. Vincent looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. The evening's program continued with a presentation about the Foundation's recent achievements, but I could see the real drama playing out in the audience. Whispered conversations, sideways glances, the subtle social calculations that determined who was rising and who was falling in Boston's medical community. By the time the formal program ended, the damage was done. Maren had been publicly upstaged by her own husband, revealed as someone who'd tried to exclude the very person funding the event. In a community that valued both generosity and propriety, it was a devastating combination. As guests began to mingle during the reception, Dr. Rowan approached me privately. Mr. Brooks, I hope you'll consider joining our board. We could use someone with your perspective. I'd be honored to discuss it. Excellent. I'll have my assistant contact you next week. She paused, studying my face. I suspect there are some interesting stories behind tonight's arrangements. There usually are, Dr. Rowan. There usually are. She smiled knowingly and moved on to other guests. I was officially part of the inner circle now, while Maren had been relegated to the periphery of her own professional community. The evening was far from over, but the first phase was complete. I'd established myself as the wronged party, the generous donor who'd been inexplicably excluded by his own wife. The narrative was set, and narratives had power in a world built on reputation and perception. Maren appeared at my elbow as Avon stepped away to speak with other committee members. We need to talk, she said through gritted teeth. Do we? I thought your colleagues didn't want me here. Stop playing games, Kellan. You're embarrassing both of us. I turned to face her fully, noting the stress lines around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. I'm not embarrassing anyone, Maren. I'm simply attending an event that I funded. If that creates embarrassment, perhaps you should examine why. You know exactly what you're doing. Yes, I said quietly. I do. The question is, do you? The ride home was silent, except for the soft hum of Avon's hybrid engine. She'd offered to drive me, sensing that Maren and I needed space to process what had just happened. Maren had left the party early, claiming a sudden headache that fooled no one. That was quite a performance, Avon said as we pulled into my driveway. Was it that obvious? To me, yes. But I've been watching Maren operate for years. She has a talent for making herself the center of attention, usually at someone else's expense. I looked at her sharply. You know her well? Avon's expression darkened. We have history. 3 years ago, she tried to have me removed from the hospital's fundraising committee, claimed I was overstepping boundaries and creating conflicts of interest. The real issue was that I'd questioned some irregularities in her department's research funding applications. What kind of irregularities? Phantom expenses, inflated budgets, money that seemed to disappear into administrative costs. Nothing technically illegal, but ethically questionable. When I raised concerns, Maren went on the offensive. She nearly succeeded in having me blacklisted from every major charity in the city. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. What stopped her? Dr. Rowan. She'd been watching Maren's activities and had similar concerns. But Maren is careful, and she has powerful allies, like Vincent Hale. They're more than colleagues, aren't they? Avon nodded. Everyone knows, but no one talks about it openly. Vincent has too much influence, and Maren is too valuable to the company. As long as they're discreet, the administration looks the other way. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not surprise, I'd suspected the affair for months, but confirmation always hit differently than suspicion. How long? I asked. At least 2 years. Maybe longer. 2 years. That coincided perfectly with Maren's personality change, her increasing distance, her sudden obsession with work events that didn't include me. I'd attributed it to career ambition, but it had been something much more personal. Kellan, Avon said softly. I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy to hear. Actually, it's a relief. I've been questioning my own perceptions for so long that having confirmation feels like clarity. She reached over and squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? I'm going to finish what I started tonight. The house was dark when I entered, but I could hear Maren moving around upstairs. I poured myself a scotch and settled into my home office, opening my laptop to begin the next phase of my plan. My first stop was our joint financial accounts. As the primary account holder, I had full access to everything: checking, savings, credit cards, investment portfolios. Maren had always been happy to let me handle the finances while she focused on her career. That trust was about to become a liability. I started with the credit cards, placing temporary holds on all accounts pending suspected fraudulent activity. The holds would last 48 hours while the bank investigated, during which time the cards would be unusable. Then I moved to the checking accounts, transferring funds to a new individual account I'd opened that morning. I wasn't stealing anything, the money was legally mine to move, but I was ensuring that Maren would face some immediate practical consequences for her choices. Next, I accessed our shared cloud storage and downloaded every file related to Maren's work, her communications, and her social media accounts. She'd been careless with passwords, using the same combination for everything. Within an hour, I had a complete picture of her digital life. The evidence was damning. Text messages with Vincent that went far beyond professional communication. Photos from business trips that looked distinctly personal. email chains discussing how to manage the Kellan situation and maintain appearances until the promotion comes through. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. But the most revealing discovery was a document titled Post-Divorce Financial Planning. Maren had been consulting with a lawyer for 6 months, calculating asset division and alimony payments. She'd been planning to leave me, but only after securing her promotion and maximizing her financial position. I printed everything and organized it into neat folders. If Maren wanted to play games with lawyers, I'd make sure I was prepared. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Vincent. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Starbucks on Newbury Street." I deleted the message without responding. Vincent could wait. Footsteps on the stairs announced Maren's approach. I quickly closed the laptop and picked up a book, arranging myself in a casual reading pose. "Kellan?" Her voice was hesitant, uncertain. "In here." She appeared in the doorway wearing her silk pajamas and an expression I hadn't seen in years, vulnerability mixed with fear. "We need to discuss what happened tonight." "Do we? I thought it went rather well. Dr. Rowan invited me to join the board." Maren's face crumpled slightly. "You humiliated me in front of my colleagues. I gave a speech about honesty and transparency. If you felt humiliated, perhaps you should consider why." She stepped into the room, wrapping her arms around herself. "This isn't like you, Kellan. You're not vindictive." "You're right," I said, setting down my book. The old Kellan wasn't vindictive. The old Kellan trusted his wife, supported her career, and believed in their marriage. But that Kellan was operating under false assumptions. What's that supposed to mean? I stood and walked to my filing cabinet, pulling out the folder of printed evidence. "It means I know about Vincent. I know about the lawyer. I know about your plans to divorce me after your promotion comes through." The color drained from her face as I set the folder on my desk. "I know you've been using our joint accounts to fund your affair, those business dinners and conference trips that somehow never appeared on any official calendar. I know you've been telling your colleagues that I'm holding back your career, when in reality, I've been funding it." Maren sank into the chair across from my desk. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for months. I confirmed it tonight when you tried to exclude me from an event I paid for. That level of contempt doesn't develop overnight." "Kellan, I can explain." "Don't." My voice was sharper than I'd intended. "Don't insult my intelligence with explanations. You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." "What consequences?" I opened the folder and showed her the bank transfer confirmations. "You'll find that our joint accounts have been restructured. You still have access to your personal checking account, but the shared assets are now protected pending our divorce proceedings." Her eyes widened. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. I'm the primary account holder, and I have legal authority to protect marital assets when there's evidence of misuse. Your lawyer should have explained that to you." Maren stared at the documents, her hands shaking. "This is insane. You're destroying our marriage over a misunderstanding." "I'm not destroying anything, Maren. You already did that. I'm simply refusing to pretend otherwise." She stood abruptly, her composure finally cracking. "Fine. If that's how you want to play this, we'll see what my lawyer has to say." "Please do. I'm sure he'll be very interested in the evidence I've compiled." Maren stormed out, and I heard her bedroom door slam. A few minutes later, I heard her voice through the walls, a heated phone conversation that lasted nearly an hour. I finished my scotch and reviewed the evening's accomplishments. Phase 1 was complete. I'd established public credibility while exposing Maren's deception. Phase 2 would be more complex, involving Vincent and the professional consequences of their affair. But for tonight, I was content to savor the moment. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. The next morning brought a series of interesting developments. I woke to find 3 missed calls from Vincent and a lengthy email from Maren's lawyer requesting an emergency conference to discuss recent financial irregularities. I ignored both and instead called my own attorney, Patricia Chen, whom I'd retained the previous week. Patricia was known for her methodical approach and her ability to anticipate problems before they became crises. "Kellan," she said, after reviewing the documents I'd sent her, "you've been thorough, almost suspiciously thorough. I like to be prepared. This level of preparation suggests you've been planning this for some time. I've been gathering evidence for some time. The planning started yesterday." Patricia laughed. "Fair enough. From a legal standpoint, you're in an excellent position. The financial moves you made were completely within your rights, and the evidence of the affair strengthens your position considerably. What about Maren's lawyer? He's claiming financial irregularities. He's fishing. Maren probably panicked when she discovered the account changes and called him immediately. He's trying to establish grounds for emergency relief, but he doesn't have a case. You moved your own money to protect it from further misuse. Good. What's our next step? That depends on your goals. Do you want a quick, quiet divorce, or are you looking for something more comprehensive?" I considered the question. A quiet divorce would be simpler, but it wouldn't address the professional misconduct that had enabled Maren's personal betrayal. "Comprehensive," I said finally. "In that case, we need to discuss Vincent Hale and the workplace relationship. That's where this gets interesting from a legal standpoint." Patricia was right. Vincent's position as Maren's supervisor created a host of potential legal issues: harassment, abuse of power, misuse of company resources. If I played this correctly, the consequences would extend far beyond our marriage. After ending the call with Patricia, I drove to my office downtown. I'd been working as an independent communications consultant for the past 5 years, which gave me flexibility and a network of contacts across Boston's business community. My assistant, Jamie Morrison, looked up as I entered. Jamie had been with me since I'd started the business, and she had an uncanny ability to read situations. "You look different," she said immediately. "Different how?" "Focused. Like you've made a decision about something important." Jamie was perceptive. "I'm getting divorced." "Thank God," she said without hesitation. "I was wondering how long you'd put up with Maren's nonsense. You never liked her. I never trusted her. There's a difference. She always seemed like she was performing rather than living." Jamie's assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Maren had been performing for years, playing the role of the devoted wife while planning her exit strategy. "I need you to do some research," I said, settling into my office. "Vincent Hale, Vice President at Boston Medical Research. I want everything: professional background, financial records, any public scandals or controversies. This is about more than divorce, isn't it?" "Much more." Jamie's research skills were exceptional, honed by years of corporate communications work. By lunch, she'd compiled a comprehensive dossier on Vincent that made for fascinating reading. Vincent's rise through the medical research hierarchy had been meteoric. Too meteoric for someone with his modest credentials. He'd jumped from middle management to vice president in just 3 years, despite having no advanced degrees and limited research experience. More interesting were the financial records. Vincent lived well beyond his salary, maintaining a lifestyle that suggested additional income sources. His mortgage alone consumed 60% of his official earnings, leaving little room for the expensive car, country club membership, and frequent travel that characterized his public image. "Look at this," Jamie said, pointing to a series of consulting fees listed in Vincent's public financial disclosures. He's been receiving payments from 3 different pharmaceutical companies over the past 2 years, companies that just happened to have contracts with Boston Medical Research. The implications were clear. Vincent was taking money from companies that his department was supposed to be evaluating objectively. It was a classic conflict of interest, and potentially illegal depending on the specific arrangements. Can you trace the timing of these payments? I asked. Already did. They correlate almost perfectly with contract approvals from his department. Vincent gets paid, then his department approves the company's research proposals. I leaned back in my chair, processing the information. Vincent wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was running a sophisticated corruption scheme that put the entire medical research foundation at risk. Jamie, I want you to prepare a comprehensive report on these findings. Include everything: the timeline, the financial connections, the potential legal violations. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to give Vincent a choice. That afternoon, I finally responded to Vincent's repeated attempts at contact. I sent a simple text. Riverside Park, 4 p.m. Come alone. Vincent was already waiting when I arrived, pacing nervously near the riverbank. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, his usually perfect appearance disheveled and strained. Kellan, thank God you're here. We need to clear the air about last night. Do we? I sat on a nearby bench, forcing him to remain standing. What exactly needs clearing? The party, the speeches, all of it. Maren is devastated, and I think there's been a misunderstanding about the professional relationships involved. Professional relationships, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Vincent's face flushed. I don't know what Maren has told you, but Maren hasn't told me anything. She didn't need to. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos I'd found in their shared cloud storage. Vincent and Maren in what was clearly a hotel room, clearly not discussing medical research. Sit down, Vincent. He collapsed onto the bench beside me, his face pale. Here's what's going to happen, I continued calmly. You're going to end your relationship with my wife immediately. You're going to transfer to a different department where you have no supervisory authority over her, and you're going to be very careful about your future professional conduct. You can't tell me how to run my career. I pulled out the folder Jamie had prepared and set it between us. Vincent, do you know what a conflict of interest investigation looks like? Because I do. I've managed communications for 3 companies that went through them. He opened the folder and began reading, his expression growing more strained with each page. This is all public information, he said weakly. It is, but it's never been compiled into a single narrative before. It's never been presented to Dr. Rowan or the Foundation's board of directors. It's never been shared with the pharmaceutical company's compliance departments. Vincent closed the folder, his hands shaking slightly. What do you want? I want you to disappear from my wife's life. I want you to clean up your professional conduct before you destroy the Foundation's reputation. And I want you to understand that this is the only conversation we're going to have about this. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, Dr. Rowan receives a copy of this file, along with evidence of your affair with a subordinate. The pharmaceutical companies receive copies on Tuesday. The state medical board gets theirs on Wednesday. By Friday, you'll be looking for a new career. Vincent stared at the river, processing his options. He was smart enough to understand that he had none. This is blackmail, he said finally. This is consequences, I corrected. You made choices, Vincent. Now you get to live with them. He stood abruptly, leaving the folder on the bench. Fine, but don't think this ends anything between you and Maren. You're right, I said, picking up the folder. This is just the beginning. As Vincent walked away, I felt a sense of satisfaction that had been missing from my life for months. The professional aspect of their affair was handled, but the personal reckoning was still to come. 3 days passed in relative quiet. Vincent had apparently taken my advice to heart. Maren's phone calls became less frequent, and her mood shifted from defiant anger to something approaching desperation. I spent the time preparing for the final phase of my plan. Patricia had filed the divorce papers, requesting full disclosure of all assets and a complete accounting of marital funds. The financial pressure was starting to show. Maren had discovered that her credit cards were still frozen, and her attempts to access our joint savings had been unsuccessful. On Thursday evening, she finally broke. "Kellan, we need to talk seriously about this situation," she said, appearing in my office doorway with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "I don't think alcohol will improve this conversation. Please, just hear me out." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, curious about her approach. Maren poured wine for both of us and settled into what I recognized as her negotiation posture, leaning slightly forward, hands visible, expression earnest and vulnerable. "I know I've made mistakes," she began. "The thing with Vincent it was a lapse in judgment, a moment of weakness during a stressful time at work. 2 years is a long moment." Her composure flickered. "How did you—" "Never mind. Yes, it's been longer than it should have been, but it's over now. Vincent and I have ended things, and I want to focus on rebuilding our marriage." I sipped my wine, studying her face. The performance was polished, but I could see the calculation behind it. "What about the divorce lawyer?" I asked. "That was just insurance, a way to understand my options if things got worse. I never intended to actually file." "And the financial planning documents, the asset calculations?" Maren's face went white. "You've been reading my private files. I've been protecting myself from my wife's deception. There's a difference." She set down her wine glass with shaking hands. "Kellan, I know this looks bad, but if you'll just give me a chance to explain—" "Explain what? How you've been planning to leave me for 6 months while pretending to work on our marriage? How you've been using our money to fund your affair while telling your colleagues I'm holding back your career?" "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." Maren was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her mask had finally slipped completely. "I felt trapped," she said quietly. "The marriage, the expectations, the way everyone saw me as Kellan's wife instead of my own person. Vincent made me feel important, valued for my own accomplishments. So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to your husband about feeling undervalued. I tried to talk to you. You were always supportive, always understanding, always willing to accommodate whatever I needed. It was suffocating." I almost laughed at the irony. "You're upset because I was too supportive? You never challenged me, never pushed back, never made me feel like I had to fight for anything. Vincent was different. With him, I felt like I was earning something." "You were earning something. You were earning the destruction of your marriage and your professional reputation." Maren's eyes flashed with anger. "My professional reputation is fine. Vincent and I were discreet." "Were you?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo that Jamie had discovered. Maren and Vincent at a medical conference in Chicago, clearly together, despite being registered in separate hotels. "This was posted on the conference's social media page 6 months ago. It's been public this entire time." Maren stared at the photo, her face crumpling. "I didn't know they were taking pictures." "There are 12 more photos from various events over the past 2 years. Your discretion wasn't as effective as you thought." She buried her face in her hands. "What do you want from me, Kellan? What will it take to fix this?" "It can't be fixed, Maren. Trust isn't something you can repair with explanations and promises. Once it's broken, it's broken." "So that's it? 15 years of marriage over just like that?" "No," I said firmly. 15 years of marriage over because you chose to systematically deceive your husband while planning to leave him. The discovery was just like that." Maren stood abruptly, her vulnerability replaced by cold anger. "Fine. If that's how you want to play this, we'll see who comes out better in divorce court." "We will indeed." She stormed toward the door, then turned back. "You think you're so clever, don't you? With your little schemes and your evidence folders, but you're forgetting something important." "What's that?" "I know things about you too. your business practices, your client relationships, the corners you've cut over the years. If you want to destroy my reputation, I can return the favor." I set down my wine and looked at her calmly. "Maren, I've spent the past week preparing for this conversation. Do you really think I haven't considered that possibility?" "What do you mean?" I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward her. "I mean, I've already contacted every client I've worked with over the past 5 years. I've disclosed every potential conflict of interest, every questionable decision, every corner that was cut. They all received comprehensive reports yesterday." Maren's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "I'm not. I've also filed amended tax returns for the past 3 years, correcting every deduction that might be questioned. I've updated every professional license and certification. I've even had my business practices reviewed by an independent ethics consultant." She stared at the screen, reading the email confirmations from my clients. "You see, Maren, the difference between us is that my mistakes were professional judgment calls made in good faith. Yours were personal choices made in bad faith. When everything comes to light, and it will come to light, I'll be seen as someone who proactively addressed his errors. You'll be seen as someone who got caught." Maren sank back into her chair, the fight going out of her. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I've thought of the obvious things. The rest will depend on your choices going forward." "What happens now?" "Now you decide whether you want a quiet divorce or a public one. Whether you want to settle this professionally or let it play out in court and in the media. Whether you want to salvage what's left of your reputation or lose everything." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the evidence of her own deception spread across my desk. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said finally. "I know, but intent doesn't change consequences." Maren finished her wine and stood to leave. At the doorway, she paused one last time. "For what it's worth, I did love you, at the beginning." "I know," I said. "I loved you too. That's what makes this so unforgivable." After she left, I sat in my office reviewing the events of the past week. The Christmas party felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been less than a week since Maren had announced that her colleagues didn't want me there. My phone buzzed with a text from Avon. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I replied. "Dinner tomorrow?" "I'd like that." I closed my laptop and poured another glass of wine. The marriage was over, the professional consequences were in motion, and the legal proceedings would unfold according to their own timeline. But for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The underdog had become the victor, not through violence or cruelty, but through preparation, patience, and the simple decision to stop accepting unacceptable behavior. The Christmas party had been canceled, in every sense that mattered, and I was finally free to celebrate. 6 weeks later, I stood in the same ballroom where everything had started, but this time as an official member of the Boston Children's Healthcare Foundation Board. Dr. Rowan had expedited my appointment, citing my demonstrated commitment to transparency and ethical leadership. The irony wasn't lost on me. Avon stood beside me, radiant in a navy dress that complemented her confidence. We'd been spending more time together, building something genuine on the ruins of my marriage. She understood betrayal, understood the importance of trust, understood why some lines couldn't be uncrossed. "Any regrets?" she asked as we watched the evening's guests arrive. "About the divorce? None." "About the methods?" I considered the question. Maren had ultimately agreed to a quiet settlement, accepting a modest alimony payment in exchange for avoiding a public trial. Vincent had transferred to a research facility in California, his reputation intact, but his influence eliminated. The pharmaceutical companies had quietly ended their consulting relationships with him, citing restructured compliance requirements. "I gave them choices," I said finally. "They made their decisions. I made mine. Everyone got exactly what they earned." Dr. Rowan approached us, beaming with satisfaction. "Kellan, I wanted to thank you again for your discretion in handling that unfortunate situation with Mr. Hale. Your approach prevented a scandal that could have damaged the entire foundation. I believe in protecting institutions that serve important purposes. Indeed. And speaking of important purposes, I have a proposal for you. We're launching a new initiative focused on research ethics and transparency. I'd like you to chair the committee. It was perfect, a chance to build something positive from the wreckage of my marriage, to ensure that other Vincent Hales would find it harder to exploit their positions. I'd be honored. As Dr. Rowan moved on to other guests, Avon squeezed my arm. From excluded husband to ethics committee chair in 6 weeks. That might be a record. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be invisible anymore. The evening proceeded smoothly, with none of the drama that had characterized my last appearance in this ballroom. I gave a brief speech about the importance of ethical leadership, received polite applause, and settled into my new role as a respected member of Boston's medical community. Near the end of the evening, I spotted a familiar figure near the bar, Maren, attending as a representative of her department. She looked smaller somehow, less commanding than I remembered. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago, and she'd moved to a modest apartment across town. Our eyes met briefly across the room. She raised her glass in a small salute, acknowledgement, perhaps, or simply acceptance. I nodded back, then turned my attention to Avon's conversation with a potential new donor. The past was past. The future was what I chose to build from here. As we left the ballroom that night, Avon asked, "Do you think she learned anything from all this?" "I think she learned that actions have consequences. Whether she learned anything deeper than that." I shrugged. That's not my responsibility anymore. We walked into the cool Boston night, leaving the party behind. This time, I was leaving on my own terms, with someone who valued honesty over convenience, partnership over performance. The Christmas party was finally, truly canceled. And in its place, something better had begun.